You can't just hop from, oh, I learned how to rock climb, I want to go and put up a new line in the Arctic. I've been climbing for 10 years, and I've always been drawn to remote mountains. And you can be a much stronger rock climber technically than me, but I do constantly want to be out in the mountains and navigating terrain. So even the human-powered aspect, I'm just so drawn to it. I want to be out skiing on the sea ice, all these different things. And so you can be a stronger rock climber, but still not have the skill set to do this type of climbing adventure.
That is Shira Biner, the first ever recipient of the RCGS Nat Gillis Expedition Grant, talking about leading the first female plus climbing team up a new 600-meter route on Eglinton Tower in remote Auyuituk National Park on Baffin Island. That journey included a 250-kilometer ski, trek, and paddling adventure featuring cracking sea ice, polar bears, and some dangerous technical climbing on a very remote mountain. I'm thrilled to have Shira Biner as my guest on this episode of Explore, a Canadian Geographic podcast. Welcome to all you explorers out there, armchair and in motion. I'm your host, David McGuffin. I'm really happy to have Shira Biner on the podcast today, in part because I love highlighting the work of young explorers and because of her connection with the inaugural Nat Gillis Adventure Photography and Expedition Grant. Nat Gillis, for those of you who don't know, was an RCGS fellow and a talented wildlife and adventure photographer. She was taken from this earth far too soon in a plane crash last year. And in talking to Shira Biner, you absolutely get the sense the Nat Gillis Grant is being used to keep her spirit of adventure and offer our wild spaces alive. This grant was first announced last November at Geographica, the RCGS annual fundraiser and fellows gathering. It's time for Geographica again, so no matter where you are in Canada or beyond, you can help fund worthy expedition grants like the Nat Gillis by taking part in our Geographica annual silent auction. To bid on a whole range of amazing trips and experiences and clothing and other items, go to rcgsauction.com. It's a lot of fun and for a great cause. And now, on to Shira Biner and her amazing month-long climbing, skiing, trekking, and paddling adventure on Baffin Island this past summer. Joining her on this expedition were Kelly Fields, Heather Smallpage, and Nathalie Afonina. Shira Biner, welcome to the Explore podcast.
Thank you. I'm psyched to be chatting with you this morning.
We're really excited to have you with us for a whole bunch of great reasons, including that you're the very first Nat Gillis grantee awardee. Like Nat Gillis, I don't know if you knew, but she's a supporter of this podcast. She took part in our polar plunges and just an incredible person and a great loss for everyone, obviously. But so amazing that her work continues on in this way.
Yeah, and one of the original teammates for this Baffin trip was actually a friend of Nat. And so it was pretty cool when we got the award. Yeah, Kaylin was still on the team and she had to leave the trip for just different health reasons and fitness reasons and stuff. And so she chose not to come, but it was really cool because she was one of Nat's friends. And so it is such an honor to receive these grants and continue on somebody's legacy.
So I want to get into what you've been up to on Baffin, and you've been doing some amazing things, but I always like to find out where our explorers' spark of adventure came from. So tell me about where'd you grow up and what were you up to as a kid?
So I grew up in the suburbs of Toronto.
Yeah, which suburb? Let's narrow it down.
Thornhill, just north of the Toronto boundary line.
Up Markham Way, up Yonge Street, yeah.
But I was really fortunate that my parents bought this cottage on Georgian Bay. And so I grew up spending summers there when I was a little kid. And that's where my love of nature really began, like catching the frogs and just going out in the canoe. And for me, that was Honey Harbor. That place was just this big adventure in my mind. And that's where I just fell in love with the outdoors. And so I was super fortunate to have that upbringing. And then once I finished university, I moved out west and I discovered the mountains and it changed my life.
Where did you go to university, just out of curiosity? What were you studying?
I went to Queen's in Kingston. Yeah, I studied nursing in Kingston at Queen's. And I think it's really good. I didn't discover the mountains until after I finished school because I don't know if I would have.
Relatively flat territory around Kingston, luckily.
Yeah, I probably would have just been so psyched on the mountains that maybe I wouldn't have graduated. I don't know.
Yes. Many a university career has been ended by the Rocky Mountains. And so you moved out west to where?
I moved out to actually Chilliwack, BC, because I didn't really want to be in the city. And as a new nurse, they had this extended orientation for new nurses. And so I got a job at the Chilliwack General Hospital. And I started hiking in the mountains and just totally fell in love. And also at the same time, I got a road bike. And I was biking through the Fraser Valley, and I just totally fell in love with just the freedom of moving across terrain, be it hiking up the mountains or riding through the valley, and just being able to go anywhere I wanted just by myself. I didn't own a car, so I could just get anywhere. And I just found it all so beautiful. So after a year of living in Chilliwack and owning a bike, I just went on my first really big adventure where I cycled by myself across Canada in 62 days, 7,500 kilometers.
That's fast, if I can say. That seems really quick.
I only took 3 rest days. I was psyched. I just wanted to keep going. I loved it.
That's amazing. So clearly no major mechanical issues or anything like that.
No, I did. Around Thunder Bay, my bike just started making all these creaky noises, and I had to hitchhike with my bike to a bike shop. And there was, I rode through some rainstorms in Winnipeg, and there was just, when they took apart part of my bike, there was just like water oozing out of everywhere. So I had a few issues, but I only had to take essentially 3 rest days, that being one of them. And otherwise it was pretty smooth riding.
So started in Vancouver?
I started in Vancouver and I finished in St. John's, Newfoundland. So I hit every province, but 0 territories. I didn't go north. But yeah, I did every province. It was pretty special.
Good to do the Rockies early, right? Get that out of the way. Did it feel like that, or?
I thought the mountain passes would be hard. So I trained for them. Like, I loved riding hills around Chilliwack. And then because I had trained, they were actually easy. And I would get through the mountain pass and be like, oh, it's over. So it was just like, oh, that wasn't too bad. The hard part was the rain. Because when it would rain, I would be really cold. And I have Raynaud's in my fingers, so my hands would just go numb, and it would sometimes be hard to squeeze the brakes. So I was just like frozen if it was raining on my bicycle. It was a little bit sad. I was like this drowned rat, just totally frozen to the bone. So that was harder. The mountain passes were fine.
That's amazing. So basically on the Trans-Canada the whole way, or what was the route?
A lot of the way, which people would think would be boring, but in some remote areas, it's just, I was never bored. It was just beautiful. The landscape was so diverse, and I didn't mind the cars because it often had a good shoulder, and I was just obsessed. I was so happy to be out there on this adventure. Like, I had this goal and I was just going for it. And also, like, through Newfoundland, the Trans-Canada, Newfoundland's not that busy. And like all these other roads would have been too quiet. And I don't know if there is any other road that goes across Newfoundland. But I did get off of it. Like, I did the Cabot Trail on Cape Breton. So I added that on. So I wasn't always on the Trans-Canada. But it was just wild. And that was, I feel like, before everyone was on their phones. So I was less worried about, like, people being distracted on their phones.
10 years ago. Yeah, sort of the start of that wave, probably. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't have a smartphone then. I don't think. Maybe I did. I don't know.
So that's great. It's 130 kilometers a day, roughly, sort of thing.
Yeah, I think I averaged 127, 128 if you don't include the 3 rest days.
So what's that work? Like, is that like a full day? What would that be like?
I think my shortest day was going somewhere by Revelstoke to like Rogers Pass. I think that was only 60K, but it was just really beautiful. I wanted to stop and just look around. And my biggest day was 190. And some days I would be in a new town and I would just like start riding at 3 p.m. and still manage to put down over 100 kilometers because you just had to keep pedaling. It was simple. Life was simple. You just stopped when you wanted to. You ate as much food as you possibly could. And then you just kept pedaling. I just always wanted to keep seeing what was coming next. Yeah, like each province was so unique and so diverse. Be it the mountains, be it Saskatchewan, how flat it is, or Northern Ontario, which got super boring because it's just so long. Or just like the St. Lawrence in Quebec, or the Atlantic on the East Coast. It was just, it was always changing, and I always wanted to see what was coming next. It was beautiful.
Did you get to swing by the cottage? Or no, you would have gone right over it, wouldn't you? Yeah.
No, I didn't stop. And yeah, otherwise I would have gotten distracted and probably wanted to play at the cottage a little bit. I was on a mission. I was
sounds like it.
I'm doing this.
Sounds
this
like
is sick.
Were you on your own the whole way, or did you ever meet up with other cyclers, or did you?
So when I got into Golden on Eastern BC, I met this guy and we rode, I think for 2 days together. We rode to Lake Louise and then I think to Canmore. And then, so that was the only stranger I rode with. I think he was also cycling across Canada. And I think he made it, but I think he did it in 3 months. And he was stopping some other places. And then actually I met my parents where you cross from Ontario into Quebec. My parents drove up and my dad rode with me one day. So I told him he could come only if he could cycle 100 kilometers. So I said, Dad, you have to train. And my mom, she drove, but I was self-supported, so she didn't take any of my stuff. But she met us at snack breaks, and then she drove, and my dad rode with me. And I think those were the only days where I had a partner. But that was pretty special, because I guess I was his little girl. He put me on a little pink bicycle when I was a little kid, and then here I was cycling across Canada, and he got to join me for a little bit. So I imagine for him that's a pretty cool experience. And then for, my mom too, to join for a day.
So he made the 100K. Was that good for him?
Yeah. He did good. He didn't slow me down too much.
Were your parents pretty athletic people or outdoorsy people, or?
Not really. Like the way I describe our cottage is, they were Toronto suburbs people. Like we didn't really go camping or anything like that. We didn't do canoe trips. We had a canoe, but that was as wild outside as it got, was being at the cottage, which had a dishwasher and things like that. So it wasn't super rustic. But my dad I guess he was also quite driven, and sometimes he did ridiculous things like a marathon on not that much training. So I'm a bit more calculated with how I'm going to take on big adventures, but I guess sometimes he had goals too that he did. But I started running when I was 13, and endurance stuff has always been something I've really enjoyed, which is why Baffin being human powered, I really love just movement, and big long days are something I really excel at that other people might find boring. But I just get into a zen place, and it's really special. So skiing on the sea ice, you're doing is the terrain changing? Each day was changing, but I never got bored of just looking out on the sea ice and seeing this flat white landscape.
Let's get into that properly then here. Let's go to Baffin. So your latest trip was this summer, and I got the Nat Gillis grant that we were talking about. And you've documented it pretty well on your Instagram account, I have to say. It looks like such gorgeous landscape, and tough landscape too, though. So where did you start? And just walk us through this, or paddle us through this, or all the various things you did to get to where you were going. Because this was ultimately a mountain climbing expedition, really, wasn't it?
Yeah. So the way I describe it is a human-powered rock climbing expedition. So with rock climbing at its core. But I think we climbed for 3 days and spent, how many days were we out there? 29. So 26 days just being out there, not climbing. So I guess maybe because I'm not the most technically strong rock climber, that I just get so excited about combining all these other ways of traveling across the landscape. So we flew to Clyde River.
So that's, just so people can picture, that's in the middle of Baffin on the east coast. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes. So it's the east coast of Baffin. It's in the Canadian Arctic. So it's above that line that distinguishes the Arctic. And it's a small Inuit community of about 1,000 people. And it's pretty remote. You have to fly in there on these little, I don't know if they seat 15, 18 people planes. You never know if you're going to make it. Sometimes you get stuck in a Iqaluit for a while. It's remote. It's out there. And so we flew to this little community, and we started right from the town. We just got on the ice and started skiing.
Tell us who all is involved in this.
Okay. So we're a femme-them team. We're all female by sex, but my trip partner, Heather, identifies as non-binary. And I'm not great at my pronouns. I'm still working on it. But so we call ourselves the Female Plus team. And it was Heather, Kelly, Natalie, and myself. So we were 4. And most of the climbing teams trying to put up new lines on Baffin Island are either all men or mixed gender. So it's pretty special to see a femme-them team going for it on such a big such a big, intimidating area. There was another fully female team, my friend Celine and her 2 partners, that climbed around Asgard, which is a bit further south. So it's really cool to see female climbers just going on these big adventures in the Arctic. Pretty rad.
So step 1, leaving Clyde River is...
Yeah. So right from the village, we got on the sea ice and we started skiing. So we had a snowmobile cached to our base camp, but otherwise we skied with our pulks with some food and gear, like camping stuff and all that, for 150 kilometers over 7 days on the sea ice to our base camp in Eglinton Fjord. So it was pretty special because we just left the village and then we were out there. And when you're out there, it's pretty big because it is polar bear terrain. And it was just the 4 of us. Like, essentially, these, like, we're a pretty small team compared to most teams that go out there. I spoke to a lot of other teams that have traveled in this region, and they're like these big, burly, professional climbers, like 6 feet tall. And we were 5'1" to 5'4" and 115 to 130 pounds. But we just did what we could, and we went for it. We started off with some shorter days and then we got into a rhythm and we ended up being able to, travel over 150 kilometers in 7 days in the most beautiful landscape. Like, the sea ice was so engaging because it cracks, and then we had to figure out how to cross these cracks with our skis and our pulks. So pulks are these little toboggans that we were pulling that had our gear in there. And so crossing these cracks, or just sometimes the ice had pools of water over top that you were skiing through, and then the icebergs that were just like sitting there frozen in place until they would melt and be set free for a month or 2 or I guess a couple months until the ice freezes again. It was just magical with the sun never setting. It just dips down towards the horizon and then you get these beautiful sunsets, but it never sets and then it just rises again. It was so breathtaking. I loved it. Yeah, and then you get into the fjord and you have some cliffs and it was stunning.
Again, your Instagram, the pictures are gorgeous, right? And so you're on the sea ice basically just because that's the easier route to go. So you're hugging the coast and then into the fjord?
Yeah, we hugged the coastline and then dipped into the fjord. Some people do travel, like we traveled back over land and you can travel that way to get to the fjord, but I didn't want to miss out on the sea ice. My first trip to Baffin 2 years earlier, we accidentally had to navigate a sea ice breakup. We thought we'd be able to paddle from the Inuit village of Kikatarjuak, but it was actually iced in. The sea ice breakup was delayed. And so we had to navigate 20 kilometers of sea ice and sea ice breakup. And I loved it. It was this unexpected, incredible adventure. And we had to figure out, okay, what ice is strong enough to hold us? What ices are you going to punch through? And it was wild. I loved it so much. And so I really wanted to go on the sea ice again because it's so special.
For you, what are the ways you read the ice? I guess after a while you just start to know what colors and stuff, or what is it?
So I learned with my first trip what ice was strong enough to hold us and what ice wasn't. So when it was super thin on that trip, we had our dry suits on and life jackets so that if you did like plunge in part way, I mean, there could be currents under the ice that could take you somewhere, trap you under the ice, but nobody plunged in fully. So I learned what was strong because the ice is actually so strong. Even you think about skating on frozen lakes in Ontario, and small amounts of ice can be super strong, but you do have to be able to understand where it's not. Like here, if it's ever like dark patches, that's just going straight into the ocean. If you see dark water versus the light blue water on top of the ice, it was just melt water on top of the ice. And so and then cracks too, you would check out how deep is or thick is the ice from one side of the crack to the other before you trusted anything. And you just learned. It's as you're backcountry skiing, you learn to read snow a bit better and avalanche terrain. And as you slowly engage with different types of landscapes and terrain, you just learn to manage them. Same with choss, loose rock. When you start off climbing loose rock, you might pull off things, but as you learn to like dance across this looser type of rock and just be really intuitive and understand it so much better. And so maybe that's also why, I don't know, I just love all the human power parts, because you really just become one with the landscape and are moving through in such a beautiful way. I love it. So we learned, like I had learned from my previous trip, thin ice versus thick ice, and then was able to, I would go first the first few days over the sketchier or the more intimidating ice if you'd never been on ice before, which I think since the other team had never been on sea ice, it can all be intimidating. But then everyone just figured it out. It was fascinating.
It sounds fascinating. And you mentioned polar bears earlier. Were there sightings or other animals?
Yeah, so we were super fortunate in that we saw polar bear tracks just as we left like the coastline and dipped into our fjord. There were fresh polar bear tracks and some old ones. So we saw a bunch of tracks that day, but we never saw tracks again once we dipped into the fjord. And you might see a polar bear. There was a polar bear attack. Now we took park earlier this year. So you never know, but we were really lucky that we saw none. I saw some at the end of my trip 2 years ago, and they're really beautiful animals, but definitely incredibly intimidating. So you never know. And we were super fortunate this trip, to just see tracks, and the tracks are great because then it shows the team that like, they're really here. You have to take this seriously. And the paw prints are so big. And there's a photo of like Kelly's hand to this paw print. And they're these huge, majestic animals, but definitely super intimidating and require just so much like respect.
Yeah, like the greatest predator on the planet, basically, aren't they? Yeah, incredible. Yeah, and anything else like Arctic foxes, or are you seeing?
We did see an Arctic fox on, I think, our final day 29, maybe it was day 28. I'm not sure. And then I actually got a little tuft of fox fur on Eyre Lake. It was just sitting on the lake, and it's so soft. It's just pure white and so soft. They're incredible animals. The one we saw was like howling at us. What are you doing here? And hopping around a little bit. But that was I think the only fox that we saw.
So you're now going into the fjord, and so take us through that. I mean, what's that landscape look like?
It was super beautiful because you start seeing mountains and cliffs. And then it does get a bit more intimidating as you get to the end because you're like, oh, we're out here. There's no longer, you can't just camp anywhere. You have to, because it is quite cliffy and more mountainous now. But after we finally made it to our base camp where we had a cache of like our food and some climbing gear or I guess almost all the climbing gear. And we built our base camp at the base of Eglinton Tower, which is also next to this mountain called Mount Damocles. And then there's this unnamed mountain there right next to us too. So we were essentially just like sitting at the bottom of these three beautiful mountains. And it was so incredible. It was so stunning just waking up and looking around, and it was beautiful. So we spent maybe, was it a week and a half at base camp? We meant to stay longer, but we just with the sea ice probably starting to break up, we left a little bit earlier than anticipated, but it was just the most beautiful place. And then there's Revoir Pass that leads to Samford Fjord. And I'm using all the English names just because my Inuktitut pronunciation is horrific, but they do have their proper Inuktitut names that I've used while I'm writing about them. But the Revoir Pass leads to Samford Fjord, which is quite like historic for climbers and just some of the different mountains that have been climbed there. So it was just the most incredible place to get to experience. It was incredible.
So Eglinton's what you climbed, right? Is that the...
Yeah. So we started. So Nathalie decided she wanted to stay down at base camp and do some of her own little adventures around there. So Heather, Kelly, and I started at Eglinton. So we left right from our base camp. We scrambled up over some talus for 400 meters of vertical. And then we had to break out the ropes and start technical climbing. And so we had 6 like easier pitches, maybe 5, 9 and below, that led to some steeper terrain. And then in total, it was about 12 pitches. And we called it our head wall, where it got like super steep and blank, or not blank, but there were a couple crux sections that we wouldn't know if they'd be able to go and if we'd be able to continue climbing or if we'd have to rappel down. So we did were we about 8 or 9 pitches up? Heather did this beautiful, one of the cruxes of the climb was climbing up this one section, had to dance across this, like, I say dancing, like climb through this more delicate section that was more blank and had to delicately move across to this other crack system that they were able to climb up. And they did this really beautiful pitch. And one of the things that's so inspiring for me with this climb is like, we didn't know if that pitch would go. And Heather did such an incredible job and really pushed themselves and ended up, once they switched to the next crack system, ended up in this chimney. And just how psyched they were in pushing themselves in this unknown terrain and still like just moving so strong through this. And just, they were so psyched in this chimney. They'd been on belay for quite a while, had been climbing for like over an hour on this pitch, and they were still so happy up there and just psyched to be on this journey of this pitch. And I think that's one of the most special things, is not what did we climb, but how did we like grow like together and individually on this rock climb. It was just so incredible to be supporting them at the belay. And they made it to the top of their pitch, and then Kelly went up and led up the next pitch, and we fixed our ropes, which means we just attached our ropes, we stopped climbing, and they wrapped down to where I was at the belay for Heather's pitch, and we slept for a few hours. And when I say that, it's like we're on this little ledge with our feet hanging off into like air beneath our, just the air. And so we're still in our harnesses.
Sleeping?
And attached
quote
to the
unquote
wall.
sleeping?
Yeah.
Or is it actual?
No,
wow.
we slept. Yeah. We had a couple sleeping bags in this little tinfoil sack, and we snuggled up a little bit and in our harnesses still, even with our helmets on. We just stayed all attached and slept for a little while. And that was one of my favorite parts, was Heather really pushing themselves, and Kelly also on the next pitch finding a way to navigate through this steep roof and our little belay, this little world we were in that was just the three of us. Nathalie was down at the base and nobody else was around for forever. It was just magical, like just this experience all to ourselves. It was incredible.
It sounds incredible. The by myself thing would also worry me, I think, a bit, like, because you really are out there, right? You've got a sat phone, presumably, but
we just have these little inReach devices, and we had walkie-talkies that we could communicate to Nathalie, and we would do check-ins every, I don't know, remember if it was every 6 hours. But you're out there, and so you really, your risk tolerance-wise, I don't climb nearly as hard as I'm capable of when I'm out there, because you can't really make mistakes. But that's what makes it so special, is it's this world that is so uniquely ours, and the beauty that we experienced in this challenge and this whole adventure. I can talk about it, but just how breathtaking it was, you can't fully understand unless you've experienced it or something so similar. But it's wild. It's wild. We're just out there, just the three of us on this mountain.
And you've done some pretty technical rock climbing in your past. Like you've done Yosemite, right? El Capitan, and
Yeah, so I climbed El Cap before. I've climbed in the mountains in Patagonia. I've climbed in the Waddington Range. And that's what drives me. I'm really drawn to these remote places. I even in last winter was climbing in the Borneo jungle. Trying to put up a first ascent with some friends on this mountain that like has barely been climbed. So it's these kind of wild, screwed up, nobody goes there, like you're on your own. That's what I love.
The locals are all shaking their heads as you head off into the...
Yeah, the locals, like in this small village in Indonesian Borneo, there's snakes there. And there was a local on their motorcycle holding like a caiman they had hunted. And we're like, just some white people being like, let's go to the jungle. And they're just, what are you doing? And they're just, oh no. And we're like, oh yeah.
So take us back to the top of Eglinton. When you're up there looking out, what are you seeing?
Okay, so we didn't actually make it to the true summit. So what we did is we climbed to the top of this buttress feature that we were on. So we made it 12 pitches to the top of this feature. And it was 49 hours camp to camp. So I don't know how long it took us to make it to the top of this feature. But we got through this hard section, the steep part, and then we would have had to continue along this ridge and have another steep section. So we climbed for 550 meters of vertical. And including the approach, we were now 950 meters above our base camp. And it was snowing. The rest of the route was quite snowy. And just with the speed that we were moving, we knew we had to go down. So we didn't make it to the true summit of the mountain, but we made it to what we call our summit, but it's not a true summit. It's the top of this buttress feature. And we were like, you know what, this is going to be the top for us. And we descended. So it was still a new line that's, 550 meters of vertical, unclimbed terrain. And we were perched it was just incredible, 950 meters above our base camp in the sea ice. So almost a kilometer of vertical above the sea ice, looking around at it was just incredible. And so we decided to go down. Yeah. People have gone to the true summit of Eglinton, not by technical routes, but by a scrambling route. I think the first ascent was in around 1930. We might actually have been the first women on the summit. Maybe not. I'm not sure. It doesn't really matter though. Because not on the summit, on Eglinton. We just had this incredible adventure. Whether you make it to the true top or not, it doesn't change how inspiring and beautiful my experience was. And so we made it to our turnaround point. We took some photos. It was really cold. I had all my puffy pants, my puffy jacket on, every layer on. It was cold in the wind. And so we started descending. So we scrambled and rappelled for many hours.
You got fingers with Raynaud's, so how are you dealing with that?
Yeah.
Because that's crucial. Those are your very important tools.
Yeah, my teammates knew that for me, I have to keep my core warm and I have to constantly eat. And so when we would stop for breaks on the sea ice, I was had a ticking clock. And after so long, I would just get too cold and have to start moving again. So technical rock climbing does climb hard. Maybe that's why I've never been inspired to climb hard in the mountains, because my fingers, when they get numb, you just can't. They just get numb so easily. But I climb ice too. So people are like, how do you do that? But I think Maddie McNair, who's actually this incredibly badass polar explorer, she told me she has Raynaud's too. So all these things that are supposed to limit you, if you're determined enough, you just learn how to manage it. But yeah, from the top of our little buttress, we scrambled and rappelled and then hiked back to camp, super tired after a 49-hour camp to camp adventure. And it was incredible. And it's just this whole
Sounds
journey.
amazing. And so then you got to get back again, right? So
yeah, adventure's not over till you're back in the village.
It's never good to go back the way you came.
Yeah, that would be too boring. So we hopped on the ski ice. We were supposed to stay a bit longer at our base camp, but the sea ice was melting, and you can travel so much faster when it's frozen than when it's ice, water, and we'd have to break out our pack rafts. So we got back on the sea ice, skied for about 20, almost 25 kilometers to Eyre Pass, and then we had to start carrying loads on foot. So we could no longer drag our gear in the pulks on the ice. We now had to actually carry it on our backpacks. So we had to do 3 loads of gear shuttling it over Eyre Pass. And this is where definitely being smaller has an impact, because you think about, if I'm carrying a 50-pound pack and I weigh 125 pounds versus a 50-pound pack, or more than that actually, to a 180-pound man, it's significant, that difference. But in the end, it doesn't really matter. You just do what you got to do. And so we carried these loads, and they were awkward. One time I was carrying the 2 pulks strapped to a backpack. And so you're just if you don't have your body, you're just gonna teeter over with this thing that's taller than my head. And so we had to shuttle these loads, and when we got to Eyre Lake, we were quite lucky that it was still frozen enough. So we thought it wouldn't be frozen, or that it would be partially frozen, but it was still frozen enough that we could just drag our gear again. And we had so much gear, and so having everything piled in one load on all our pulks, sometimes I had a dry bag fall off, and Heather, Shira, you lost an item, and I had to run back and go get it, because we had a big mountain of gear on our pulks. But we did I think it was about 25 kilometers on Eyre Lake, and we camped at the end of the lake, made another mini base camp. We waited for a sunny day to try to climb one of the mountains around the end of Eyre Lake. And again, Heather, Kelly, and I started off this feature, but we just weren't necessarily psyched on how the day was going. And so we did, I think, 2.5 pitches and then came down. It's just in these areas, it's chossy. It might be wet. I trundled off a huge block, not near them, like they were belaying me and they were further to the right, but it's just a bunch of choss. You have to really want it, and we didn't want it that day, so we went up 2.5 pitches and came back down.
You got to read those moments too, don't you? Because that's when problems happen often.
And there's risk, and you have to be really connected with your team and just connected with being there in that experience, and we didn't really want it that day, so we went back to camp and we started down the Kugeluk River. We had pack rafts, so we loaded all our gear into, there's zippers in our pack raft so that we could put the gear inside the pack raft. But then because we had these pulks and skis, two of us dragged pulks or towed pulks behind us with the skis, inside. Because it was almost entirely flat, the river. There was like this super short section, you could call it a class 2 rapid, that was like super inconsequential. But otherwise we were just on flat water. And because it was flat water, sometimes it was frozen. And so we'd be in this little water channel between the frozen ice and the land. But because sometimes it was so little, you had to get out of your boat and drag like your pack raft over any rocks in there. And then in one spot, it just completely froze. So you're supposed to be paddling this river, but you're just walking on ice because it's the Arctic and dragging your boat on the ice. And you're like, this is ridiculous. We are so, like, you can't even paddle. But we made it to the first class 5 rapid, and that's where we took out, the outfitter was able to pick up our gear from there. So we left a stash of our skis, our climbing gear, our pack rafts and dry suits and life jackets. And then we hiked out the final about 25 kilometers over the tundra, crossing rivers and different fogginess and just the different land right back to the village. And then we just walked back into the village and, there's people again, because for these 29 days, I mean, we did see a couple people on snowmobiles pass us on the first day or so, but otherwise it was just the 4 of us out there. Then we were back in, I say civilization, but then again, it's this small Inuit village. So it's a bit different than, say, Toronto, or not a bit, it is significantly different, but from just the 4 of us being out there, we made it back.
Yeah, that's amazing. That first day back's always bewildering, isn't it? Although the shower feels good.
Days before we got a shower, and I didn't think I was that stinky, honestly, compared to the trip before. I'm sure other people would say otherwise, but for some reason the trip before, 2 years ago, oh gosh, I was horrifically stinky.
Yeah, if you can notice your own stinkiness, it's definitely stinky, right?
Or if people tell you, the trip before 2 years ago, one guy was like, you smell. You need to shower when I got back to the village. And this time nobody told me I stank when I first talked to them. So I was like, oh. And neither did my trip mate. I don't know. And I don't know what was so different. If it was the clothing that we were wearing that just didn't hold on to smell as much. But you get back and your first shower and just eating different food. It's just all these luxuries of normal life again. You just appreciate them so much more. So
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Beds feel weird, all that stuff.
And we didn't make it to a bed yet, but
that came later.
Slowly adjusting back in. Yeah.
Huh. So what was on that trip? What was the most, say, challenging day, or a day like, oh my gosh, what have we got ourselves into day that you had out there?
I think when we were on top of our buttress and knew we weren't going to make it to the top of the mountain and do more of a walk off, that became a bit challenging in that it became, okay, we have to figure out this different descent. We decided to scramble along one day and try to rappel this face and then scramble back. And it was just more unknown. So that was challenging, that it felt now serious, or it was always serious, but we were always going with this plan we had. And then it felt challenging that, okay, here we are. We have to get ourselves safely down, and sure, we can rappel our route, but we thought it might be better to go this other way. And we had to navigate more unknown, or just this unexpected descent. So that felt just mentally like a challenge. Physically, one of my strengths is just like huge days and just constantly going. So I loved like the long days on the sea ice. I loved carrying the loads over Eyre Pass. Like, sure, sometimes like it hurts, but I I don't know, I love those challenging things. So it never felt super challenging because I've done a lot worse. But I think like mentally too, just when, you're out there with only the four of you for a while and maybe you're not agreeing on how we should navigate something. I think like for me, the biggest challenges were when, the team wasn't working great as a team. So never physically was I ever, oh, this is really hard, even though in a moment it might be hard. But I think it was more just like mentally being like, oh, we're not agreeing today. And that is really hard. Or maybe it's, I don't know, just everything. I think about, I've just done so many big days in the mountains and so many over 20-hour days or carried worse loads. Like we carried, I don't even know if they were heavier because I don't know how much any of this actually weighs. On my Baffin trip, carried heavy loads that really there was more back pain, or maybe it was how I had my load set up. And I think about once I was in the Northwest Territories, I climbed in the Circuit of the Unclimbables and then paddled out the Lower Nahanni River. And I didn't have my bag packed very well. And so that was a lot more painful carrying that load when we hiked out to the river. Or I think about the bugs then, they were just so horrific. And I didn't yet have a lot of I was learning how to be like mentally stronger on these earlier trips. And I guess those were harder. And that rock climb too was, although not like I was seconding, so my friends were leading and I was on the lower end of the rope on Lotus Flower Tower, but it just felt harder because I got soaked and I was just so cold and full of Raynaud's, like my feet and my hands. And I was just so cold for so long that it felt harder. So this one, although I was like further north and in the Arctic, I just learned different tools to better manage these challenges. And so the challenges then don't seem as big.
That speaks to the need for actually preparation and training and all that kind of stuff before doing something of this scale, right?
Yeah. You can't just hop I learned how to rock climb, I want to go and put up a new line in the Arctic. I've been climbing for 10 years and I've always been drawn to remote mountains. And you can be a much stronger rock climber technically than me, but I constantly want to be out in the mountains and navigating terrain. So even like the human powered aspect, I'm just so drawn to it. I want to be out skiing on the sea ice, all these different things. And so you can be a stronger rock climber, but still not have the skill set to do this type of climbing adventure. It's been, I guess, 10 years in the making.
I just want to ask you about El Capitan, because I think for people who, when they think about rock face climbing, like that's the one. And there's been so many epic documentaries made about it and even feature movies. And in my head, I'm seeing some guy hanging from one arm. So what is that like?
So I've only climbed El Cap once. I have so many friends that have climbed it like countless times.
It's pretty accessible, right?
So they are, and they are definitely so much more experienced than I am. But for me, my El Cap adventure, I did try it once before, and I decided we went down. So we didn't go to the top. We bailed. I forget how many pitches up, or I bailed. But when I did that one, I did it actually with two women. Apparently, I'm drawn to climbing in femme teams. I think it's because I climb with so many men and I feel a lot smaller, that sometimes when you climb with someone that's more your body, that I feel less small. I'm not sure, but it's also in my head because I'm the same size regardless. But I did do it as a 3-lady team, and one day we climbed 4 pitches up and we fixed our ropes to the mountain. So we left like our ropes up so that the next day, or there was actually a snowstorm, so that after the snowstorm we could go up our ropes and then keep climbing. And I feel like we did 3 nights on the mountain, so sleeping on these ledges on El Cap on the side, and then that 4th night we made it to the top of El Cap and we got to sleep. Not like, it was so great because after so long being in your harness and having to do everything attached to the mountain, you could walk around without your harness on. You're like, oh my gosh, I have so much freedom. And then, so we did it, I guess, if you include the descent, 4 nights and 5 days, which is a bit, it's like you talk about speed, and I think the record is 2 hours. I don't really pay enough attention, sorry, to the records. 2 hours and we were 5 days, but in the end, one is much more elite in how they did it, but both of them are incredible adventures, and even some people take longer.
You're savoring, Shira, is what you're doing.
Or maybe suffering more. I'm not sure. But I have friends that have climbed it in 5 hours. One of my best friends did it in 5 hours, and I forget how many minutes. But it's just everybody's adventure and journey can be beautiful no matter how long it takes you. And so we climbed El Cap over 5 days, and it was incredible because, again, you're in your own world up there, and this time it's like a vertical world instead of like cycling across Canada is more of a horizontal world and terrain. This is vertical terrain. You're going up instead of across, and so I loved it. It was awesome. I want to climb it again, but I haven't been back to Yosemite since.
What's next? I know this has just ended, but I know with you explorers, there's always another thing coming.
Yeah. We're a bit addicted. It's like to adventure. I absolutely love Baffin Island. I'm just captivated by like the 24-hour daylight and the terrain and how remote it is and how different it is in my home. Here in my home in Squamish, there's just trees everywhere and green, and it's so lush. And there it's more just like blank. I'm not sure. It's just, there's just so much freedom in being able to move across all the different terrain, and because it never gets dark, you can do whatever you want. So I am so incredibly captivated by Baffin. So I am hoping to go back next summer. We'll see if it works out or not. But there's a whole world out there. So I would absolutely love to go climbing in Africa and do maybe some first ascents one time with some friends there.
Whereabouts are you thinking? I lived in East Africa for 6 years.
Okay. Really, it's wherever my friends want to go. They went to Chad and did some first ascents in Chad a year ago. Some have been to Angola and done some first ascents there. And sometimes they're small. They might be like a one pitch new line up this tower, which is what some of my friends did in Chad. But really, I'm just drawn to anywhere in the world that involves adventure. So it gets off the beaten track in terms of climbing. Like Yosemite, there's tons of adventure, but it's more like I'm repeating climbs that have been done versus I love it when you can get off what climbers are typically doing and do your own thing. I find so much freedom in that challenge of that. Oh, is it going to work? How are you going to do it? You can do anything. What are you going to choose to do? And so I'd love to, see, because the team matters a lot. With some friends that I love dearly, if we could go on adventures in Africa together or just anywhere in the world. But I am particularly in love with Baffin, so I do hope to go back. Hopefully next summer, we'll see.
I've never been, and it's on my list. So
it's expensive, and it's out there, and it's an adventure. Even just flying there, you might have so many flight cancellations. So it's even getting there is a huge adventure. You have to be down for whatever happens. It's not going to go to plan. But it's really beautiful, and hopefully you get to go.
With David Green on this podcast a couple of years ago now. I think he got an RCGS expedition grant the same year you did. And he had this whole hack with Air Canada and points.
Okay, you know what? People have told me about this hack. I haven't figured it out. I guess maybe I haven't tried hard enough to figure it out.
He said you got to get on the phone with them. Yeah. The key is get someone on the phone.
Mostly the aeroplane points. Yeah. Help you get there more affordably, but instead, I've just paid over $3,000, like $3,500 for return flights from Vancouver. So it's definitely, which is why the grants make these possible. And I'm so grateful to the Royal Canadian Geographical Society that gave us our Nat Gillis grant and helped make this trip possible, because otherwise we can't go because it's just a huge financial barrier. Yeah. But hopefully you'll get to go once too, because it's really beautiful. It's really special up there.
Before we let you go, I ask our guests always ask this one question, which is, what is your favorite place in Canada and why?
So I can't pick just one, but I think it's the places that have really changed me as a person. So for me, it would be Honey Harbor on Georgian Bay. That was just so influential for me, and I've just had so many incredible experiences there. So that's one of them. And then I choose also Squamish, just the forest, the granite, how the mountains here have just changed my life, and I've grown so much as a person here. And then Baffin. So I'm picking 3 just because those are the 3 places that have changed who I am hugely, like on just such an immense scale, those 3 places. So yeah, they're just so special.
So Georgian Bay in the summer, looking out and say there's a storm rolling in.
Or you get stuck out on a boat in a storm.
And those are serious storms too. Right?
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that because we live in Canada, there's adventure everywhere. It's like the nature, it's just always just so like wild adventures in nature. They're just right outside your doorstep, no matter where you live, be it the East Coast, the West Coast, the North. There's just so much out there to explore, and you don't have to be a rock climber. You can just, like, we would drive an hour and a half from our house to the marina, hop in the boat and take a boat for 15 minutes. And for me, that was big adventure, getting in the canoe or jumping off the dock into the water and everything. So it's no matter where you are in Canada, we're just so privileged to have such incredible landscapes to explore in ways that meet our challenge level, no matter who you are.
So as a country, we spend a lot of time worried about whether our cities are world-class, and Toronto goes on about that, obviously, a lot. But we have world-class wilderness. It's there. It's just there.
Yeah, it's so special. And to me, it feels like wilderness. Like the mountains in Europe, I'm less drawn to because they feel a little bit civilized, versus in Canada, it feels like wild.
Shira, listen, thank you so much for taking us on this adventure to Baffin with you and coming on the Explore podcast.
Thanks for chatting with me.
If you enjoyed this interview, be sure to go back and check out episodes 84 and 95, both featuring Laval Saint-Germain. Laval is also an RCGS fellow and an avid and record-setting mountain climber. He's climbed Everest without using oxygen, as an example. But as important as the actual climbing is, like Shira, Laval really savors the adventure of getting to the mountain and getting out again. So definitely check those out. And can I ask you a favor before you go? If you like this podcast, could you please give us a rating and write a review where you listen, like this one from Wow4286, who wrote, "The compassion with which David interviews is a beautiful experience to share. Thank you." Wow, thank you. And thanks to all of you for listening. I seriously couldn't do this podcast without you. It's a joy to do this every 2 weeks. Remember to visit the RCGS auction at rcgsauction.com to support the work of the Royal Canadian Geographical Society and expedition grants like the Nat Gillis. Until next time, when we'll explore again, I'm David McGuffin.
I think right now we're enjoying very much looking back at the Earth, and it's just a fantastic experience, and I just can't wait to get back and start telling people.
We left Simpson about June the 10th with the Fur Brigade, consisting of a number of yacht boats, each manned by 10 voyageurs.
For us Inuit, it means that Inuit oral history is very strong.
And we flew low over every inch of the country that could be. We were hoping that he would fire at us.
I guess 160 dives or so. There are shrimp, fish swimming around outside. It's just fabulous here.
Well, I'm a first for Canada.